I'm going to be talking about some ideas of things that we can do. Um, kind of, I did my presentation. My original presentation was on what I commonly term grassroots lobbying, but we're not using the L word, so it's citizen activism. What to do if you're going to go up to the state capitol. But so much of that was covered. So then I put in some storytelling information. And then we had this idea of like, what if you want to have a group with you go to lobby? Now I've got 45 slides, but don't worry, I am not going to talk for 45 minutes. I absolutely promise you that. So this presentation overall is called Storytelling for Policy Change. Just a reminder, Leadership Institute, 501c3, nonpartisan nonprofit. We were founded by this man, Morton Blackwell, back in 1979. Our mission is to increase the number and effectiveness of conservatives in public policy and politics. And we do that by doing trainings like this. And since 1979, we've trained 33,000 conservatives. Last year, I alone trained about 3,000 of those. I'm sorry, I said 33,000. It's 333,000 conservatives since 1979. And Leadership Institute is a 501c3, as is Liberty Counsel. We have an open admissions policy to our classes. We don't support or oppose candidates or pieces of legislation or political parties. And the faculty views are not necessarily views of Leadership Institute. You can find out more about us at leadershipinstitute.org/training. By the way, I see that most of my unidentified guests have dropped off except for guest number 10, but I am going to be sending out a follow-up email with all of the speakers' information, a link to the recording, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I can't do that if I don't have your name and email address. So if you were listed as one of the guests, and right now I've just got one left, guest number 10, please chat in your name, and that way I can get your email, your name and your email, since it's only going to me, and that way I can follow up with you and make sure you receive this information. So again, when we're going up to the state capitol to make change, and these are all the things we've talked about today. First, you need to know which piece of legislation you're talking about. We've talked about several of them today. Awesome. Susan Crane, I already had your information. Thank you very much. We've talked about several pieces of legislation today, but I'm going to show you how to find the legislation that's coming up in your state. I want you to build those coalitions. We've already talked about building the coalitions quite a bit. We've talked about meeting with legislators and staff, and then you need to prepare to give effective testimonies. And that's what we're going to close with. Finding the legislation in your state. One way to do it is by signing up for news alerts. Places like your local Right to Life, your local Family Policy Council might just be putting into their newsletters when things are happening. Again, join the coalitions that you're on the calls so that you know when the big key pieces of legislation are coming, and also when different groups are hosting like days of the Capitol. Last month, January 29th, I went to Pro-Life Day at the Capitol. I wore this dress. I wore a red dress and I walked around the Capitol being pro-life. That was my job that day. Not my paid job. I did it as myself because as a member of a 501c3, I have to take time off to do that. But this is what I did for the day. I went down and I made my presence known in our state capitol. And that's an important thing to do. But I wouldn't have known about it had I not been part of the coalition and gotten the email alert. You can go to state legislative websites in South Dakota. It's legis.sd.state.gov. And I still remember that from my times of being a lobbyist in the state capitol there. So you can do that. And then there's also, whoopsie, go back one more. There's also this. There's something called Americans United for Liberty. They are Americans United for Life. AUL, Americans United for Life, is a fellow pro-life organization. And they have a website, and I'm going to show it to you here. Whoops, hold on. Let me spread this out so I can actually see it. They have a website, and I'm going to show it to you here. I'm going to stop that share and restart this share. And occasionally I'm going to keep popping back to this thing. This website right here is all about what is going on in Florida. What's going on in Florida? Why? Because I chose the Florida from their website. and you can click on any state. Well, I can go back one level and I can click on any state and it'll tell me what's going on, what the current laws are, and what laws are coming up, what laws are being considered, and when was the last day that there was any action on these bills. So this one hasn't seen any action since 2023. So I don't have to worry about this one. And these are all pro-life, pro-family bills. And so I don't have to worry about that one. But like this one, well, these guys had action just this week, these ones that are marked 219. So if I haven't been on this website for a while, I might click on 219 or these ones that are marked for 219 that they had movement on them and see what the heck is going on. And that way I can find out whether or not there is action where I should be going to the State House to take action on those. So let me go back to my presentation. There we go. And share. So that is that. So I'm going to give you a link to that AUL website because that is one of the best resources that I've seen in quite some time to know what's going on. The next piece is contact pro-life groups in your area. Again, identify as many pro-family advocacy groups and policy groups in your state, especially the ones that have got a presence in the state capitol. Sign up for their alerts, email them, introduce yourself, tell them that you're interested in coming up to the legislature and talking with members of the House and the Senate. Have dinner with them, build those coalitions. And the building doesn't stop now. What you're doing now is laying the groundwork for what goes on next year and the year after and the year after. So always keep building those and building forward. Connect with them. Our lady who is in charge of the Virginia VSHL, Citizens, for Human Life, Virginia Society for Human Life. That's what it is. VSHL, Virginia Society for Human Life. Her name is Olivia Gans Turner. I've been on her email list for quite some time. She and I were at a meeting last year. One of our friends in common had a meeting in her house to say, hey, this amendment is coming and we need to take action on it. And Dena knows her stuff, but she works around the country. Olivia knows her stuff. She knows she works here in Virginia. So that was the beginning of our friendship because in our relationship, we met and we talked about that stuff. And then on Wednesday, when I was down there, for professional reasons, I took her out to dinner to say, okay, how can we get Leadership Institute involved in Virginia and doing trainings of pro-lifers and getting pro-lifers more involved in the political process. And that was just one of our ways that we connected. And now tonight, I will actually be on a webinar with her board talking about how Leadership Institute can help them achieve their goals through trainings. And so that those relationships just keep building, just like Summer talked about. You meet, you make the introduction, you meet face to face, you make the connection. How can I help you? And then how do we keep our progress moving forward? And then also show up to events. Every time she has an event in this state and I am in this state, guess where I'm going to be? I'm going to be at her events to help her out, to support her, to support the cause. So now let's see. I'm moving and mowing through these pieces today because so much of this had already been covered by the other people. Let's talk about meeting with legislators or staff. So you can go it alone. You could go up to any legislator at any time, anywhere, and talk with them. I lived in Northern Kentucky at the church where I went, St. Therese Parish in Southgate, Kentucky. We had Senator Bunning. Senator Bunning, God rest his soul, he passed away a few years ago, but he was the Kentucky U.S. state senator, not the state senator, he was the U.S. senator from Kentucky, along with Mitch McConnell for quite some time. And he went to our church. And so anytime that we would see him, you could say hello. And occasionally people would ask him about matters that were going on in the U.S. Senate. Now, I always thought that was a little weird to be talking to your senator at church about Senate stuff because he's trying to pray. But it happens and it's not necessarily bad. My dad went to daily mass. His wife goes to daily mass. My dad still goes to daily mass. His wife, Mary Bunning, still goes to daily mass. They'll still talk about pieces of legislation and what's going on, even though her husband, the senator, has passed away. So there's, the option of being out in the community and just having that one-on-one meeting. When I lived in South Dakota, we would see members of the state house and the state senate in restaurants, and you would just go up and talk with them like they're normal people. And then because they knew that I worked for the Pregnancy Care Center and I was a lobbyist for the Pregnancy Care Center, ultimately we would talk about pro-life issues and pro-life matters. And these things just happen. Now, are they the most effective meetings? Probably not. Obviously, these guys just want to live their lives and live on their own. So I'm not going to walk up to anybody in a restaurant. Like if I saw one of my leftist members of the state house in the restaurant, I might go up to them and say, "Hello, it's good to see you again. Have a great day." Introduce myself and move on. But I'm not going to accost them in the restaurant and be like, "How dare you vote no on my pro-life measure?" That would be really uncomfortable, and that doesn't build relationship, that doesn't build faith, and that doesn't build trust. So just kind of be aware of your surroundings. Now, if you're going to the state capitol to have meetings, that's a great time to do it. Also, when they're home over the summer and in the fall, you could call up and ask them and invite them to a meeting at your house or at the local coffee shop or whatever else, and have meetings that way. The benefit of doing a meeting one-on-one is that you get to control what's talked about. We've already given the example today of when I went to the meeting on trade policy, and the woman talked about genetically modified GMOs. That's the words. Talked about the genetically modified organisms, and it just went completely off the rails, and we lost our chance to talk to the senator about what we wanted, what we were supposed to talk about. She was all excited because she got her own little personal agenda in, but we didn't get our professional agenda in. So you don't have to worry about it going off the rails. There's less stress, and there's now if you're scheduling, you've got one day up at the state capitol and you're scheduling to have meetings, you're not going to get to as many meetings as if you've got many teams of people with you. So this is one of the ways why you might want to go with a group. If you bring up 10, 15, 20, or 500 people with you, then you can hit many different offices. You can make appointments at many different offices and send teams of people in to each of the offices to do the talks, to tell the stories, to do the lobbying, to do the thing. One of the cool things was when I was a trade lobbyist, we would do these what we called fly-ins. They would fly in groups of 5 to 10 business people at a time, and then we would escort them around. And they would have different types of meetings according to who was being flown in. So I was a lobbyist for the Tea Party, and there was another group that was a lobbyist with business people. And there was another lobbyist concern that was with the unions. But behind the scenes, we were all working together. So the union guys might have their people in at the same time I had Tea Party people in. I remember one time we left Nancy Pelosi's office, and that person, that staffer, would not give us an answer one way or the other on how they felt on our particular trade issue. And as we were walking out, we had trained all of our people. Yes, we all know each other. We are going to completely ignore anybody that we see as we're passing in the hallways because we don't want the offices to know that we know the other delegation. So as I'm leaving Nancy Pelosi's office, I hear one of my people go, "Oh, hello." And I turned and I looked, and she goes, "There's lollipops." Because what she was really saying hello to was the trade union delegation was about to go meet with Nancy Pelosi's people. Now, Nancy Pelosi's people would not give us an answer, but those trade union people who she assumed were leftist walked in there. They got all the answers that they could want. But had they known that we were working together collaboratively, number one, we're wasting their time because now we've got 2 meeting slots for one group. And number two, she would have had her, "Oh, you're with the Tea Party people. We don't want to talk to you." So it was a close save where she was like, "Well, hello, there's lollipops." And she picked up a lollipop and licked it and walked out. It's like, oh, thank God, my Tea Party people hanging in there. We can do this. So there is some benefit to going with the group. You get to hit more people. You get to introduce different sides. There's the social pressure of seeing. When I was down at the state capitol, we all wore red. And suddenly one day you have 500 people wearing red show up at the state capitol. Everyone's talking. There must be something going on. There's some group here because they're all wearing the same color. And when they would, oh, we're the pro-life group. Oh, okay, you're the pro-life group. We also have pro-life stickers on. So there's that social pressure of, oh, the pro-lifers are here today. We got to talk about abortion and life and the problems of abortion and that type of thing. It does take more planning, but you can hit more offices. So let's talk about these fly-ins. Now, I call it a fly-in, but obviously, if I'm going down to Richmond from Northern Virginia, I'm driving. So it's a fly-in or a drive-in. And again, this is from anywhere from if you're bringing a group of 5 or 10 people with you, or you want 1,000 people to show up with you. And you go, oh my gosh, Gina, can we really get 1,000 people to show up at the state capitol? Maine did. Maine Right to Life and a group called Voices for not choice. Voices for Life, Speak Up for Life. That's what it was. Speak Up for Life and Maine Right to Life got more than 1,000 people to show up to give testimony at a hearing. And the legislators sat and listened to every single person who wanted to give testimony for 24 hours. So you can absolutely get 1,000 people to show up, and that will absolutely make a difference. As a matter of fact, Maine did not pass the pro-abortion amendment that they were trying to pass. Was it because 1,000 people showed up? I don't know. I'm just saying good works happen when good people come in. So let's talk about how to organize a fly-in. I put together this handy list for you. It's got 25 steps. Only 25. Don't worry about it. I know you can't see them. So let's break them down. First, you build the coalition. We've already talked about that. Second, you decide on a date with your coalition. Right now, in Washington, D.C., there's some things a brewing. There are groups of which I'm not in the communications of the leadership, but I'm waiting for dates to come out to say, hey, we want all the pro-lifers to show up on this day. And so I'm waiting for those dates. They are deciding on what are the best dates possible to have as many pro-lifers come from across the country to either do the House side or the Senate side or both. You're going to send out save the dates. As soon as you know this is the date that we're doing our fly-in or our drive-in, you send out save the dates to your coalition members, and you ask those coalition members, those leaders, to send it out to their membership groups. And then you find allied groups. So, for instance, the local Moms Homeschool Coalition may not be in your pro-life coalition making day-to-day pro-life decisions and pro-life legislative decisions, but they're pro-life. Send them the save the date. Let them know about it. The homeschool community is awesome for the conservative community, us. Why? Because they need opportunities to show their kids civic engagement and teach their kids about civic engagement. And we have a classroom, a living classroom, where they can bring their kids and show them how the legislator works and walk them through it. It's awesome. And they show up in droves and they'll dress how you want them to. And then fundraise if necessary. Whoops, my necessary went off the screen there. Sorry about that. Fundraise if necessary, meaning if you're going to be serving people food, if you need to buy hotel rooms because you're in a big state, if you need buses to get people moving, go ahead and start fundraising to make that happen. Set the dress code, plan attendee briefings. You're going to want to plan webinars to decide to teach people what to say and how to say it, and also to remind them what the dress code is for the day. For our Virginia Pro-Life Day, it was wear anything red, but they didn't want us in t-shirts. We had to wear professional dress. So what you would wear to church or better is what we tell people when we say set the dress code. Collect registrations so that you know who's coming, schedule the meetings with the different offices, assign a group leader. The group leader would be someone like me. I'm a former professional lobbyist. So you would say, okay, Dena, we trust that you're going to go in and do the right things and say the right things. And we're going to give you a group that's going to go with you. And then I might get introduced to my group, assigned group members. And when I'm assigned to my group, when I see who my group is assigned to me, I might find out that one of them was born alive after a botched abortion, and one of them had an abortion and really regrets it now. So the coalition should be working with those two people to really refine their stories and refine their messages so that they're ready to tell their stories in a very short time. Because in these meetings, you only have 15 minutes. So I would come in, I would give the introduction, I would point to the first person, they would give their 3-minute story, next person give their 3-minute story. We make the ask, we ask if there's any questions. Bam, we're done. That's 15 minutes. It fills up really fast. Set the schedules. Each group is going to be told you have to be here and here and here and here and what time you want them to be there. If you don't have a group, when I went down to Virginia, I didn't have a group because all of my legislators are pretty much far left. And so my schedule was drop off these papers at each of your legislative offices, and then go to the gallery, and then you're going to go to this committee hearing if you're able to stay after lunch. And that's what I did. I went to the offices, I dropped off the paperwork, I went to the gallery because we wanted as many people in the gallery as early as possible to take the seats. And then I went to the committee hearing, and I'm going to show you the committee hearing here at the end. Create a leave behind. You should always, when you lobby, have something to leave behind. Usually it's a one-pager. I'm looking to see if I've got a leave behind. This would be an example of a leave behind on Amendment 4. Now, it happens to be part of a bulletin, but this one page right here would be the perfect leave behind. So they've just told their stories about why we don't want the legislator to pass Amendment 4. And then the person who I've given the leave behind to in my group who doesn't say anything other than, here's some more information. If you've got any questions, let us know. Thank you for meeting with us. And that's my fourth person in the group. And they're the ones that hand out the leave behind. Print out a whip count sheet. A whip count sheet would be, it's just a simple grid. And I want you to fill in the name of the person that you were meeting with, which office they were in, and are they very positive with us? Are they somewhat positive with us? Are they neutral? Are they somewhat against us? Or are they very much against us? And you're going to ask them that. Can we count on your support for this bill? You're unsure at this time? Okay, thank you very much. No, you don't think so? Over my dead body? Okay. And you have your people fill those out as they go, because that's the information that's coming back into you to say, who are the people that we think should be pro-life that can be pushed in one direction or the other, that need to be given that little extra push. And that whip count sheet is what's going to tell us that. Does that make sense to everybody? If so, chat in at me. Excellent. And thank you, Brenda, for giving me your name and email. And then organize folders. Give your groups each a folder, or give everybody a folder. So even though I didn't have a group, I got a folder which had the different bills that we were talking about that day and educating about that day. It had my little sticker in it. It had some contact sheets in there and other things, and then the schedule of where they wanted me for that day, even though I wasn't in a group. So that is organized so that everybody gets a folder. And then you organize a hashtag. So Virginia didn't do this so much, but it's an easy way to collect pictures of the day. We want you to take a picture with every single office that you meet with. Go ahead and take a picture with the office, with the staff member, or with the member of the legislature if you get to meet with the member of the legislature. So everybody needs to look their best because we're going to be constantly taking pictures with people. And then we want you to text them, email them, post them up on social media, and use this hashtag so we can pull them down and grab them quickly. The next one is hosting a breakfast, organize and host a breakfast training that morning. So whenever I did a fly-in, we always gathered everybody for breakfast at the same time, at the same place. Sometimes the breakfasts were at 6 a.m. because you have to be ready for the 6:45 a.m. committee hearing. But you would get everybody together and go over everybody's purposes and points. You know what you're going to say, you know what you're going to say, you know where you're going to go. If you've got a group of 500, it's, do you guys all have your groups? You have your meetings, you have your organizers. Does anybody have any questions? Here's what our talking points are. and going over and over again. Here's what the talking points are. When I was in Virginia, they gave us an update on the 5 pieces of legislation that were moving forward and the one that we were trying to stop. And they said, here's what the talking points are on each of those. And they went over it very briefly. Then I want you to get everybody together and take a group photo. And it doesn't matter if it's a group of 5 or if it's a group of 500 or somewhere in between. Take a good group photo so that you can talk about what you did for fundraising purposes and to thank your donors and to get more people coming down, because now they missed out and they have to get started and try again. Release the groups. Everyone go to your meetings. And then remind them to arrive early. If there's going to be a committee hearing that day that you want everybody to attend, remember to arrive early for the committee hearings, because we want to take up as many seats as possible, especially if we're all wearing one color. We want that whole entire committee meeting to be read so that they see the social proof of here's all the people who are pro-life sitting in the committee hearing. Does that make sense? Set locations for lunch and dinner. The only reason to do this is that you can check in with your groups. We are all going to meet at the cafe at noon. If you're able to make it, if it fits into your schedule, come and join us for lunch. And that way you can, what happened? Oh, that went bad. Oh, but you know what? That's okay. We were never expecting to get their vote. You did well. You kept your cool. You did a great thing. You're going to talk with them and talk them through the highs and the lows, get everybody sharing their story, get them amped up. Oh my gosh, we got another new vote. Way to go. High fives. Get them amped in and remind them, hey, everybody's going to the gallery immediately after this so we can flood the galley. The gallery is the area of viewing that's around the top of the legislature, where the legislators look up and then they make announcements and introduce groups that are coming to visit that day. Record and share stories of the attendees. If somebody had something great happen, hit that video record and say, okay, stand here and tell us all about what you guys experienced today. And save those and then put them out on social media. Send them far and wide. It's important that people see that we are making a difference, so that they want to come, and it's important for them to see that this was impactful and it was fun and it was interesting, so that they want to come again. And then again, everyone go up to the galley for the recognition. And then you collect the whip count sheets from everybody who had meetings. Make sure you get those in and tally them up. Figure out if any of your people moved or if anybody needs a little extra pressure. And then the last but not least, step number 25, send out thank you notes to coalition partners, allied groups, group leaders, and members' offices. Basically, you're going to spend the next day and a half writing handwritten thank you notes to everybody who had a meeting and everybody who was met with, over and over and over again. So if you've got a high school, Catholic high schools are great. Christian schools are great. Invite them to your fly-in day, because they'll send the senior class down, or the junior class down, or whatever. And because it's important for them to learn what goes on at the state legislature. And hey, this is a time where they can actually see things in progress. Send a thank you note back to that school. Send a thank you note to the mom's homeschool group. Send a thank you note to your coalition members who helped you make this possible. Send a thank you note to your donors, along with the videos and the testimonies of what happened that day and how important their $50 donation towards donuts was. It couldn't have been possible without your $50 towards donuts. And most importantly, send a thank you note to every single office with whom anybody met. Thank you so very much with with our group on the Pro-Life Day. We understand that this is not your big issue, but if you've got any questions, please let us know. Our number is this. We hope that you'll find your way to voting yes on issue number 12567. Does that make sense? And that right there is how to organize a fly-in in 25 simple steps. I'm not seeing any questions yet. That is awesome. Let me write this down, by the way. Thank you. Number 10. And the Gmail. Okay, sorry, I had to take that note before I lost it. So when you're meeting, we've already gone over this. Be professional, be prepared, be appreciative, be direct, get to the point, be concise. Plan on 10 minutes for meeting, 5 minutes for introductions and goodbyes, and do not go long. Be done within that 15-minute window that they give you. And the next and the last thing we want to talk to you again about is preparing your testimony. You can do written testimony or you can do verbal testimony. You can do both, and that's the beauty of it. So written testimony is where you put the unspoken bits of information and the statistics and the things that you're not going to get to, extra stories. You're going to write it formally and you're going to include stories, statistics, and references. You're going to submit this through the legislative website or via email to the committee chair or the committee members. And here's some locations. Always cite where you found your statistics, but I'm going to stop the share here and show you some areas where you can find great statistics and great information. Once I find, here it is, share. Okay, so the first one I want to show you is this International Institute for Reproductive Loss. They have got this annotated bibliography and research recaps. They are basically going through every paper that has ever been published about abortion, about how abortion hurts women, about how choosing life is better. And they are writing about it so that you can find out about it, read about it, understand it, and use it. This is amazing. And they've got these PowerPoint presentations that are accessible that you can download in whole and use just the way they are. And it is amazing. The work that these people have done, it is mind-blowing and boggling. And so I want to talk about them whenever possible. That's the International Institute for Reproductive Loss. Charlotte Lozier, the Charlotte Lozier has been around for decades, and they've been doing research on pro-life and pro-life laws. Dr. Michael New is one of their big writers, as is Ingrid Scup and a whole bunch of other people. They do great research, and so their information is there. Americans United for Life has made all of their previous written testimonies available for you to search and copy and paste and use. So if you're like, I need something on Virginia HJ1. Okay, so this is a perfect example because this was the one that I was actually there on. Well, I wasn't there on this particular date, but this is one of the things that we were meeting with was HJ1. So if I wanted to do a written testimony or a written presentation on HJ1, I can actually open up his information and see his testimony and then grab pieces of it to use for myself. Always give credit. Don't be a plagiarist. Do not be like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. Don't plagiarize. But you can say that you found this information from John Mize at AUL. And then this is really cool. I am going to give you a link to this. This link is www.leadershipinstitute.org/pro-life files. Leadershipinstitute.org/pro-life files. If you are from one of these states and we have done a training in your state, you can look at the slides that we presented. You can look at all the information that we have collected in your state. Let's see here. There should be one for South Dakota since we had Amber on. This is your absentee balloting from last year, your election day manual from last year, your election worker information, the PowerPoints that we presented, the secure elections law, the no on G flyer, everything that we've collected in your state is there. If you don't have your state there, invite me to do a training and I'll put your state up. But then down here, this is all the different white papers and pieces of research that I have found through the last 2.5 years that I've been working specifically just on pro-life laws and such. Like people say, oh, well, Jewish people are pro-life or pro-abortion. Well, actually, oh, where did it just go? I lost it. There's an actual thing on here about explaining the Jewish position on abortion, Jewish faith in abortion. And it's all about how true traditional Jewish faith is very much pro-life. So it's different things that you can use to push back and say, well, that's not necessarily true. And it's all here so you don't have to go looking for it in other places. Leadershipinstitute.org/pro-life files. So that is if you want to do written testimony, because written testimony, you can do the statistics. Here's an example of written testimony. This is from Melissa Oden. She tells 3 stories in here, and then the last 5 pages are just like this. So she starts off with the stories, and then this thing is 12 pages long, but this is like summary of a study, summary of a study, summary of a study, summary of a study, over and over and over again, just showing. So when the other side says, well, there's no evidence that abortion causes harm, she turned in 7 pages of summaries of studies that show that abortion causes harm. And that's pretty cool. But do we have time to talk about 7 pages worth of studies when we're doing verbal testimony? Probably not. At most, you've got 3 minutes. At worst, you've got even less than that. So why would we want to give verbal testimony? You got to keep it short, but it helps you share emotions. It helps you share your story. You get to conclude with an ask, and you can prepare for questions. So telling a better story. Let's talk about that first, and I'm going to swing back to some of those other pieces. These are the different slides that I put together. We're going to run through them really, really, really fast. Stats versus stories, the one big thing, sticky intuition and structure. Okay, so the problem with statistical thinking, if you use too many stats, if you use any stats, you trigger the analytical part of the brain, and the analytical part of the brain diminishes emotional response. Statistics aren't caring. You can't empathize with a statistic. So we don't want to do statistics when we're trying to change people's hearts, when we're trying to change people's minds. They move with emotion. They back up their new position with statistics. So move them with the emotion, and that emotion comes from stories, because stories are personal, they're emotional, they can connect. A good story releases oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone, and a connection, that oxytocin, that connection leads to empathy, and that empathy leads to action. So you tell the story, you get them crying, and then you make the ask. Do you want to save children like mine from suicide, from the danger of abortion, because it's a side effect of abortion? Yes, then you need to vote no on this law. That's the ask at the end. We're leading them to take a commitment, to make a commitment, because we're using their emotions against them. How do we tell a good story? Well, these guys that put this book together called Made to Stick said the secret to success, SUCCESS, is simple, unexpected, credible, concrete, emotional stories stick. Simple. Pare it down to the least amount of words that you can tell your story in. Do something unexpected in your story. I just mentioned suicide and abortion. You probably weren't expecting that today. If you've got a story where somebody has some unexpected result from an abortion, or some unexpected result, she survived an abortion. She was the baby that was born after the abortion doctor screwed up, and you want her to be killed because you will not pass this law. Share that unexpected twist. Credible. Your credibility is really, really simple. As a mom, as a woman, as an abortion survivor, as a person who had an abortion and was damaged, as a best friend of somebody who had an abortion, as a parent of somebody who had an abortion. It's that simple to build your credibility. All you need is like one little line, and credibility also comes from how you're dressed. If you are a doctor and you're up there speaking from a medical perspective, I want you wearing that lab coat. So if I was a doctor and I was going up to testify, I would wear my red dress with the lab coat over top. Stethoscope gives you bonus points. Concrete. So I told you to pare your story down as little as possible. Then I want you to grab some concrete details to attach to it. I'm not getting to any stories today, so I'm not going to give you an example of this. But if you really need an example of this, look to any one of my recordings, which will be in the follow-up email. Also, we've got an entire system or entire program on how to tell a better story. It is 8-9 webinars long. The next one is tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Eastern time, with David B. Wright is going to be speaking on jealousy and gatekeeping. It's called the Storyteller Symposium, leadershipinstitute.org/storytelling Get all your information there. Emotions. Don't be afraid to share emotions. What makes you mad? What makes you happy? What made you so sad that you have to cry when you're up there testifying, even though you've got a very short time. So simple, unexpected, concrete, emotional stories stick. The next thing I want you to do is use intuition. There's a researcher called Jonathan Haidt. He's got a book called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Diverge on Politics and Religion. Jonathan Haidt, through his research, he found that universally people use the same six moral foundations to communicate. Caring. We want to see people who are caring. We despise those who cause harm. Fairness. We want everyone playing by the same level playing field, the same rules. We don't like people who cheat. Sanctity. The idea that something's come from God and should not be defiled, but also the idea that you've got a bubble zone around your body that should not be infringed upon. Like I would, if I were holding out mealworms, I do this because when I worked at the Cincinnati Zoo, and I would show kids the mealworms, which are what the little inch long waxworms we would feed to the animals, and you use them for fishing. I would pop one in my mouth and eat it. And they were delicious. They tasted like buttered popcorn. The abdominal juices slush across your tongue. So delicious. How many of you are grossed out right now? Ew! Exactly. It's because I violated your sense of sanctity. You don't want to eat worms. So therefore, you've got a sanctity barrier against that. Does that make sense? Good. So we don't want to defile things that should be protected. Authority. Somebody is in charge and we always listen to them. Anti-authority would be when you are purposefully disrespecting authority, or authority is overbearing and needs to be pushed back against. Loyalty, the idea that you are loyal to the people around you. You are loyal to the people that show up. You want to work with them. You want to help them. It's one of those reasons why when you're building a coalition, you want to keep showing up at events because you become loyal to the people and you try to help them even more and they try to help you. And then the last one is liberty, the idea of freedoms, of rights, of we hate bullies, we hate tyrannical governments, we hate oppressive corporations. Now, Jonathan Haidt in his research, and this is usually a 45-minute presentation standalone to get to this slide right here. But let me just tell you this. In his research, he found that the farther left you are, the more you strongly reject sanctity, loyalty, and authority. And the more you endorse caring, fairness, and liberty. Sanctity is not a zero. They understand it. They just don't react positively to it. Moderates, where people think moderate is where they should cross. It's not. It's right here. Sanctity is still below the moderate line. But caring, fairness, and liberty are above, and authority and loyalty are crossing over, so they're neutral. So if you are going to go and give testimony at the state capitol, and I know we are a religious group here, Liberty Council is all about religious freedom. Before we began this webinar, you guys didn't see us, but in the green room we prayed. But if I were going to go to the state capitol and I had to convince moderates, liberals, and very liberals, moderates, leftists, and very leftist legislators to vote with me, do I lead with because God said so, or protect the sanctity of human life? No, they reject those messages. So instead, tell a story about how abortion hurts women, how it causes suicide, how we've got an epidemic of teen depression right now, or depression among women ages 20 through 40. We've got a practical epidemic of that. Why? Could it be because of abortion? Dang straight it could be. So anyway, talk about how abortion harms women, how abortion harms men, how abortion destroys families. Those are the things that cause them to move towards a less pro-abortion stand, because now you're tugging on their emotions and you're using their intuition against them, and they can't figure out why, but they really want to vote with you, but they're pro-abortion and they, oh, but if I vote yes on this, I'm now also pro-teen suicide. Yes, you are. Put them in that position. Social conservatives, you can see here, social conservatives react to all of them equally. Then there's some very conservative people that put a higher emphasis on liberty, authority, and sanctity. but caring and fairness still works for them. Now, charging on through. This is how most people tell stories. You have to tell the story. We don't want to do statistics. Can't empathize with the statistic. You have to tell the story to get the information across that you care about this issue, that they are causing harm, that they are not fair, that your solution is fair, that your solution gives life and liberty because you're giving mothers the right to parent the children that they actually want instead of forced and coerced abortion, which comes from this abortion legislation that you're putting in. Does that make sense to everybody? I can see you all shaking your heads. Thank you very much. This is how most people tell stories. This is wrong. I want you to streamline your story. It should have a hero, a challenge, a choice, an outcome, and an ask. A hero, a challenge, a choice, an outcome, and an ask. And you need to figure out how to give it in 30 seconds, in 1 minute, in 3 minutes, and in 5 minutes. So I want you to be able to do them shortly. So here is a story from Minnesota. Let's see how quickly I can get this one in just a few seconds. So the might go like this. There was a small town girl who lived in Minnesota. She was the pastor's daughter. Her boyfriend was the banker's son. When they found out that they were pregnant, they went to his family for help because they were like, we need to know what to do, and my family can afford to help us. We love each other, and your family can't because your dad's poor. He's just the pastor. The dad was so incensed. The banker was so incensed. He started screaming at them, how dare you do this? He called her a gold digger and a hussy and a slut and all this other stuff. He threw her into the car and he took her down to Minneapolis, and they went to the big abortion facility. And while she was crying, saying, but I want my baby, I want my baby, the abortionist took her baby from her. Why? Because that man who was not her dad paid for it and forced her to sign the consent forms. In Minnesota, they don't have parental consent anymore. They don't even have parental notification. And then he took her home and he said, you will never tell anybody about this again, because if you do, your family will lose their house because your dad will lose his job and you live in the church's house. And so she was morose and sad. And when mom and dad asked what's wrong, she said, nothing. We broke up and I don't want to talk about it. She finally told them what was wrong when she dropped a note at her feet after she hung herself from the ceiling fan. Mom and dad found her a few minutes later, but it was too late to revive her. She never did admit to them that she had an abortion, and she never did admit to them why she was so sad and so depressed. But the fact is that abortion causes suicide thoughts. Parents need to be involved in their teens' health decisions, and we cannot allow people to force and coerce women into abortion. This is wrong. And your bill will actually allow more abusive adults to force and coerce children into abortion, children who should be turning to their loving families. Do not let what happened in Minnesota happen here in Virginia. That's why I want you to vote no on this issue. There, that right there was about 2 minutes, which was too long, frankly. So I got to pare it down. Morton Blackwell's law, because you're like, I've been working in a pregnancy care center and I've got 40 years of really great stories. Find one. One big reason is better than many little reasons. By the way, your verbal testimony will look like this: an introduction, you build credibility, you tell your story, you make an ask, you sit down. I prepared my story. I was preparing. This was the actual testimony room where we were hearing testimony. I've only got 2 more slides. I'm going to push play on this so you can actually hear what the testimony sounded like. You're not going to be able to hear what's going on the mic because it's so quiet, but let me hit play on this. So everybody gets called forward. They tell us we get 3 minutes and it starts when they start, but we're already down at 250. 248, 247, 15 seconds of our 3 minutes. Introduce yourself again. I've been helping him make it 20 years. Really hard to hear. This woman from CWA goes out and sits to the mic. People who we encounter when we are by the abortion. This woman is out here. Out here.
from abusers who've been brought to the car and taken to a safe place.
And I know you've got a lot to say, but there's a long line of people. You've used a third of their time, so if you could make a point very fast so that everybody can make their point.
Okay.
I'm on your side, okay? I just want your side to be heard.
So many of these women have fallen through the cracks and need help just offered by the sidewalk council of the abortion clinics. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So she didn't even really get to any stories because she spent so much time talking about multiple different things. And then one of our guys cut her off, and that's on the committee, and said, hey, you've only got 3 minutes and look how many people there are. You need to get to the point. So then everybody stood up and just said their piece, said their piece. They extended just a tiny bit. And I was the very last person to testify. You saw I had a full page written out of what I want to say. Here's what I got to say. Here we go.
On your side of the issues.
That's not me.
Thank you, ma'am. Next.
This is me.
Christina Espenscheid from Quantico, stand for myself. I oppose this bill. Please help women, not abortionists.
Thank you.
And that was it. So be prepared to say absolutely nothing, but at least you're standing in solidarity with the thing. Things to remember: make an ask at the end of the testimony, distribute written testimony to the members of the committee, and I'm sure AUL and the other professionals that were there distributed their much longer testimonies. You can always ask the chair if you can distribute a one-pager or a handout. If you have any friendly members of the committee, plant questions with them. So the questions can be used for clarification or to give you extra time, because the beauty of it is when they ask you a question, the amount of time that you take to answer does not go on the time clock, and you can talk as long as you want until the chair cuts you off. Thank the committee for their time and thank the supporters for their votes. So afterwards, go home and write thank you notes for their support and their votes. And here's everything we just talked about: finding the pro-life legislation in your state, contacting pro-life groups in your state, meet with legislators, and provide effective testimony. For more information on Leadership Institute, it's leadershipinstitute.org. And for everybody who is on this, you're going to get the follow-up email. If you happen to find a recording of this and you're like, wow, I want that follow-up email with all those links that she just shared, send me an email, Dena, D-E-N-A, at leadershipinstitute.org, D-E-N-A at leadershipinstitute.org, and I will get you that follow-up email. You guys have a great night. Thank you very much.